Hey, good morning and welcome to Cornerstone Church. Before we get started with today's message, I have a few announcements to make. And this first announcement is one that I've been waiting weeks, actually months, to share with you, and that is this. We are going to be returning to our in-person services here at Cornerstone starting next Sunday, June 21st, which is Father's Day. Now, this is a day that we've been anticipating for a long time. As I shared these last few weeks, there are a number of barriers and variables that we had to consider that would allow us to open both legally and safely. And so, as a leadership team, we've met this past week. We're following the guidance provided by the Governor of New York, and we are opening up our services coming this Father's Day, next Sunday, June 21st. Now, a few things about that. When you come into church, whether you choose to come in physically to church or you also obviously can continue to watch us online, that option will still be available. Now, I know some maybe have some pre-existing medical conditions or other things that make you tentative to attending in person, and that is fine. I want everybody to feel comfortable with how they engage in worship with us. So if you feel comfortable in coming with us, then please do so this next Sunday. If you have some medical things, some other obstacles or variables that would keep you or make you hesitant to joining other people in person, then by all means, please continue to join us online. This will continue to be streamed every week, so that you can partake in our worship. So I don't want to anybody feel pressured. I want people to feel comfortable and pray about your decision. But for those of you that will be joining us online, stay tuned for this week. I'll be having a video come out, and in that video I'm going to share with you some things that we've done with our building here, our physical building. We have spent some time and some effort into obviously making sure everything's clean and everything, but we had to do some restructuring as well. You'll see, for example, when you go into the auditorium, that you'll see the chairs spaced out. We have spaced those chairs out at least 6 feet. Rows 6 feet apart from each other. We've divided up those chairs. We have some rows of 4, some rows of 2, some rows of 6. So we've done that so family units can still sit together, but there's still going to be a social distance between those rows. And you'll see that in the video that I post a little later on this week. We will not have Cornerstone Kids. Our kids ministry will not be running, nor will the nursery be running for the next few weeks at the very least. That's still a concern area because of our Cornerstone Kids room. It's not much for social distancing in there. So we made a decision that we are going to have our kids join us in our auditorium in our main service. Now, what we're going to do is have things available for your kids. We're going to have lesson plans, maybe some coloring pages, and some things available for when you come in. You can grab your packet for your kids, and then you can have your seat in your row. And I'm going to incorporate the kids into our services in the auditorium, meaning that the messages and the lessons that we're going to learn, we're going to make sure that's applicable for your kids as well, and we're going to engage with the whole family. So it's going to be a really cool, unique opportunity for you as a family to worship together and to learn together. So I encourage you families, if you're comfortable in doing so, come out, bring your kids out. We encourage you. We miss everybody, and we can't wait to be together again. A couple of other announcements. Guys, starting this coming Wednesday is the beginning of the Warrior Conference. Now, we've been going to the Warrior Conference for a number of years now, but this obviously with COVID-19, this year's Warrior Conference is going to be completely streamed online. It's going to be Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night of this week. Now, if you haven't purchased a ticket for that yet, you can continue to do so, and the link will be down below, warriorconference.com. Guys, I encourage you, if you've never been to a Warrior Conference, this is a great opportunity for you to experience what it's like to learn and to have some fellowship with hundreds, if not thousands, of guys this year. And maybe this would be the year that you attend virtually, and then next year you're going to die to come with us to New Hampshire for the actual in-person conference. So please, guys, join us this week. If you need more information, obviously you can go to warriorconference.com, or you can speak to me as well. Drop me a line. I would be glad to share you my experiences and why I think it's so important, guys, for you to get plugged in to Warrior Conference. Also, parents, as we say every week, it's very important that we continue to keep our kids plugged into both Cornerstone Kids and Crave Student Ministries. So if we haven't done so already, please go to our Facebook and download those links, download those lessons planned, so we can continue to get your kids plugged in and continue their learning and growth even while we have been separated. we want to continue to thank you for your giving here at Cornerstone. And there's 2 different ways that you can give. And actually, starting next week, there's 3 different ways that you can give. Right now, you can give by going to either one of the links below. You can go to our online giving platform at cbctoday.com/give, or you can mail in your gift to the address below. And of course, next week, if you're coming in person, you can start to begin to give again in person in our offering and giving boxes here at the church. And either way, we're so grateful and so excited. There's going to be more information for you. Like I said, there's going to be a video coming out this week that's going to walk you through what it's like and what you're going to experience if you choose to come back to our in-person service starting this next week. Until that time, let's get into a time of worship this morning before we get into today's message.
Inside, it's comfortable. Inside a house, inside a family, inside a routine. But what if we widen our view beyond the fence across the street? Outside, we find people struggling with loneliness, poverty, families that don't look like ours, or without a safe family at all. Jesus didn't call us to live by our neighbors. He called us to love our neighbors.
All right, so this week we are beginning a new series simply called How to Neighbor. And it's kind of carry off of this last series we just got done going through is the What's Next series. We talked about those next steps that you would take in the life of a believer, maybe as a believer for a long time. We talked about some practical things that you could be doing in your spiritual life to take you to that next level. Maybe as a new believer, you've always kind of struggled, what do I do here? What do I do next? And I'm hoping that you found some answers in the past 5 weeks that we've had that series. Last week, we started transitioning, even though we were still in the series of What's Next, we started to transition our thoughts a little bit and our tone a little bit to really start talking about this immediate world around us. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world around us, and some of these things have been happening for years and years, and some of these things all of a sudden have become in the spotlight. And I thought it was so appropriate for us to continue having a good conversation, a good discussion, a good talk about what it's like to be, first of all, to be a Christian during this time. That we have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of opportunities to share the love of Christ. We talked about that last week. We talked about that love of Christ that allows us to reach out to those who are our neighbors. And we used the example of the Good Samaritan this last week. So kind of continuing on that same type of voyage, this week, this beginning of this series is called, How to Neighbor. And the title for today's message is simply this, Lonely Loved. And we're going to talk about loneliness today. We're going to talk about those who feel self-isolated, those who feel like they have no one else to grab onto, those who feel that they're maybe so busy or so alone in their homes that they have no one else that they can relate to. Loneliness is something that we all experience in our lives. And here are a few examples. I'll ask this question, maybe start this way. What do you think, what kind of people, who do you think battles loneliness? And I'll let you think about that for a second. Who do you think battles loneliness? And it's kind of a trick question, just to give you a little hint. Because as I just said, loneliness is something that each one of us has experienced. I'm going to be bold and say that we have experienced in our lives. You know, sometimes we think of loneliness, we might think of maybe an older person may be living by themselves or someone that perhaps maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you're home alone with the kids all day, or maybe you were in college and you're surrounded by other people in your dorm, but you can still feel lonely. Maybe you work around a lot of people and you have a lot of physical interaction with people, but you can still feel lonely. You can be in a dysfunctional marriage and you can still feel lonely. You can even run a successful business and appear to be on top of your game, but you can still be lonely. It's because loneliness is something that we all experience, myself included. I've also been through bouts of feeling lonely and having experienced that loneliness. So it's an important topic to talk about, because as we talked about last week, and when the wise Jewish man, the Jewish leader, asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered him and gave him that really good answer. Basically, everyone is your neighbor. And so obviously we think of neighbors as those who might live next to us or across the street from us. And yes, those are our neighbors. But our neighbors is also another word I use for it, is our community. It's those people that we interact with each and every day, those people that we pass by in our lives. Those are our neighbors. So how do we be a good neighbor? How to neighbor? And how do we help those who are experiencing loneliness in their lives? One of the reasons that people experience loneliness in their lives, just one of the factors, is simply because they lack a support system. There's maybe a lack of love or a lack of empathy that they experience in their lives. They lack some support when they're going through something. Maybe they don't feel they have someone they can call upon to talk to about that, someone to listen to them, someone to share their story with. And so we want to talk about this this morning. Here's some additional contributors to loneliness. Yes, the breakdown of the family system, the breakdown of the family unit, that can contribute to the feeling of loneliness. In this day and age, we are so connected, right, to social media. Some of us are, and there's social media everywhere you go. And every day when you wake up, maybe you go on Facebook first, or maybe you check out some other your Instagram accounts, or whatever your social media thing is. And sometimes we get so connected into those social media that all it's doing is deferring our loneliness. It's trying to take a place, trying to fill the void in our lives. And so that can also be a contributor to loneliness. Some of us have very heavy workloads. Some of us, from the moment we get up, we are running, we are at full speed. We're getting the kids ready for school or whatever it is. Then we're jumping off to our jobs. We're spending all day on our feet or all day doing our work. We get home and we have after school activities and sports, or maybe for some of us, maybe it's a second or even a third job. And we're constantly going. And we are so busy that we have no room for self-care. We have no room to take some time and to talk to somebody, take some time to really build some connections. So the question I asked you this morning is this: how do we love the lonely? And yes, as I just said, all of us have experienced loneliness in our lives. But just for a moment, let's take ourselves out of it. And let's talk about those around us who are experiencing loneliness right now. How do we love the lonely? So how do we love the lonely? I want you to do something this morning. Let's do a little exercise together. Right now, I want you to think about someone that you know in your life that could be experiencing loneliness. Now, it could be someone that you work with, someone in your office, someone that you interact with and talk every day, and on the outside, they appear to be fine. They have a smile on their face, but you have this feeling that they are experiencing loneliness at some level in their lives. Maybe it's a grandmother who's lost her husband. Maybe it's a teenager that you know that just doesn't feel like they're fitting in. See, like I said, all of us have experienced or will experience loneliness at some point in our lives. We've all gone through those awkward teenage years, perhaps, or maybe that wasn't you, maybe that was just me. But we've also all gone through experiences maybe in college, or experiences when we first get a job, or when we first get our own apartment, and we're trying to make connections, we're trying to build friendships, and maybe we have some good friendships, maybe we have some good connections, but there's still something in our lives that make us feel lonely. So I want you to identify someone that you know that you feel might be experiencing loneliness. And while you do that this morning, I'm going to share with you a little sob story of my own, just to give you some personal example of this. When I was in college, in my friend group that I had, which included my brother, obviously, and some other really close friends, but at one point, it was my senior year, and all of my friends, including my brother, were either engaged to be married or had already gotten married. And I remember one Friday night, I was walking around the campus, and I usually work Friday nights, but for some reason I was off. And I remember walking down the sidewalk we had a gym. I was walking the sidewalk by the gym, and the other building on the other side of us, on top of that, was our married apartment. We had a couple that lived there that were married, and I could hear a bunch of music and noise and sounds and all this stuff, and people having fun. And I looked up in the windows, and all you could see were all these couples, and they were posting like a couple's a game night or something. And all of my friends were up there, including my brother. All my friends were up there with their significant others, either their fiancés or their wives or husbands. And I remember it was some sad movie scene. I think it started to rain a little bit. I remember looking up in that window, and at the time I wasn't in any kind of relationship. And I remember looking up in the window and just getting this Eeyore look to my face, where I felt really just sad and lonely and discouraged. And why am I the only one that doesn't have? Why wasn't I invited to the party? Oh yeah, because I don't have anybody. So we've all been there. We've all experienced loneliness, and maybe it was for a moment, maybe it's been for years, maybe it's you right now, where you're currently experiencing loneliness. So I want you to think about someone in your life right now that's experiencing loneliness. And the reason why I want you to think about that person is because this is going to be a message, this is going to be a lesson that I'm going to ask you to make some practical application this week if possible, so that you might be an encouragement to those that you're thinking of right now that might be experiencing loneliness. See, once we identify that someone is experiencing loneliness, I feel that there's an obligation to obviously to show empathy, but to be a friend to that person, to be a shoulder they can cry on, to be someone they can just share a story with, or just to talk to. So this morning we're going to talk about 3 specific things that we are going to do with love to those who are experiencing loneliness. The first thing this morning is simply this: love with touch. If you look in Matthew chapter 8, we're going to read a couple of verses here this morning. In Matthew chapter 8, starting in verse 2, it says this. It says, "A man with leprosy came and knelt before him, Jesus, and said, 'Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean.'" See, leprosy, you've probably heard of someone that has leprosy or heard of that disease before, but let me give you some of the physical characteristics of leprosy so you can get an idea of how lonely this guy must have really felt. See, leprosy, if left untreated, a person could die within 10 years. It starts with them feeling very tired and the fatigue in their joints, but then it turns into scaly spots that start to develop all over their body, and maybe some lumps that start to develop on their body. Their face begins to physically change as well. Their vocal cords even begin to be impacted, which can cause their voice to change, and their bodies begins to decompose, and it can even develop into an extreme stench. See, there's several stories, especially in the New Testament, even in the Old Testament, about those who had leprosy. And I find it very, very interesting that the Bible has several examples of that. And for me, that tells me that somebody with leprosy was considered to be unloved, was considered to be obviously the outcast. There's a story in the Old Testament how the leopards, the men who had leprosy, were cast out of a city, and then they chose to go to their enemy's camp and just be killed there because they figured it was better than to live with their leprosy. And so in the New Testament, obviously in this example in Matthew chapter 8, this man with leprosy comes to Jesus. And he says to him, "Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean." Now there's a whole example, a whole story right there about faith in Christ, and this man knowing that simply by putting his faith in Christ, and he knew that Christ could save him. He knew that Christ could make him clean or to heal him. But this is continuing in verse chapter 3. It's very interesting. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." Immediately, he was cleansed of his leprosy. If you think about it, Jesus didn't have to touch him. Jesus simply could have said, "Okay, thank you for your faith. Thank you for your trust. You're done. You're clean. It's okay. I heal you of your leprosy." He could have done that with a snap of his finger, with a clearing of his throat, with just his words. He could have done it any way that he desired. But I find it very significant that Jesus physically put his hand on that man and said, "Be clean." First it says, "I am willing," and then he says, "Be clean," and he immediately was cleansed and cured of his leprosy. Jesus healed other people sometimes just by speaking words. We know that. That's recorded in the New Testament. But for this specific man, he chose to touch him. Love with touch. And again, that's our first point this morning. Why do you think Jesus touched him? Now, there's a multitude of answers. The Bible doesn't really tell us, so we kind of have the freedom to think into that a little bit. And this is what I think, and this is why I think that Jesus touched him. Perhaps it was because this particular leper didn't just need healing from the disease that he was suffering with, but maybe this particular leper needed to feel love from all the rejection that he had been feeling in his life up to that point. Something about a loving touch can change everything. Have you ever been going through something, just use it as an example, have you ever been going through something and you're talking to someone and all of a sudden they just reach up and they put their hand on your shoulder? Or someone comes up behind you and just pats you on the back. Maybe gives you a little tug, maybe gives you a little squeeze, and you just feel something. You feel like you matter. You feel like you're important to that person. See, physical touch, it can mean so much to most of us, right? I'm a touchy-feely person. I like to high five. I like to pat people on the back. That's just part of who I am. But one of the reasons that I do it is because I want people to know, first of all, that I care about them. It's so easy for have a conversation and have a really deep conversation, but for me to if someone is in despair, someone's upset, someone's crying, I have a natural tendency to want to pat them on the shoulder, maybe give them a little hug, and showing some compassion and some empathy in doing so. So again, why do I think Jesus touched him? Well, perhaps he knew that this man needed more than just healing from this disease. This man needed to know that he was loved. And he needed to know that he was no longer rejected, but that Christ loved him. So remember, we can love with touch. So how do you do that this morning? How is that something that you make part of your world this week? I've already said this is going to be a challenge for you to think about that person that you know that might be experiencing loneliness and to do something in response to that, to be an encouragement to that person. So how do we do that? Now, in the day and age of COVID-19, we don't touch anybody anymore, right? It's going to be very interesting next Sunday. We're coming in. We're so used to shaking hands and high-fiving and doing hugs, and we're going to have to lean back on that a little bit, and at least initially. But let me tell you something. If you're with somebody that's experiencing loneliness and you're able to have a connection with them, sometimes just that encouragement, that tap on the shoulder, that little hug that you give them can be more to them than your words ever will. So remember that we can love with touch. So after we understand the concept of love with touch, we need to then move on to the second thing this morning, which is to love by listening. Listening and learning how to really listen to somebody is a skill that takes some time to acquire. And see, most of us, when we listen, we are waiting for an opportunity to formulate our response. We're waiting for an opportunity to formulate our reply. Maybe someone's sharing a difficult situation they're going through, so automatically our brain starts thinking about maybe a similar situation that we've experienced, and we're waiting for the opportunity in the conversation to jump in and say, oh, I've done that. This is what happens to me when I experience that. And maybe someone's sharing with us just some deep thoughts, some deep questions that they have in their life right now, and maybe instead of really focusing on what they're saying, we're already trying to formulate what an answer, what a response to their question is. So we need to, most people, I should say it this way, most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to quickly reply back to the person. I think it's important that in those times, in those conversations, that we really take our time and we listen with both the ears. I love this expression, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we should do twice the listening than we actually talk. I think that's so very, very important. There's a story, and again in Luke, Luke chapter 24, and this is actually after the resurrection. This is after Mary and the other Mary found Jesus' empty tomb, and these are a story of several people walking together, starting in verse 17. Let me just kind of read this whole section to you, starting in Luke 17 through verse 19. And out of context, it sounds a little odd, so here's the context. These are people that are discussing the fact that Jesus had died and that Jesus had been put on the cross and had been slain for us. Starting in verse 17, Jesus asked them, so this is the resurrected Jesus seeing these men, seeing these people talking. Jesus asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? Well, they stood still, it says, their faces downcast, and one of them named Cleopas asked him, and obviously not knowing it was Jesus, says, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days? And I love what Jesus says here. He says, what things? See, Jesus understood that when people these men are experiencing sadness and they were distraught, they were discouraged by what had happened, which was the crucifixion, right? Jesus understood that they were sad, and instead of trying to give them an answer, he simply kept asking other questions. He was engaging with them. He was listening and trying to understand where they were coming from. And what a great example for us to listen with the intent to understand somebody rather than with the intent to reply. I try to focus on this. I try to focus on being interested, not necessarily interesting. Does that make sense? I want to focus on being interested, not necessarily interesting. One of the things that I've learned, and a thing that makes a lot of sense to me, is when someone is going through loneliness, start asking questions. See, when you ask questions, it allows a person to know that you're listening to them, especially obviously if you're asking questions related to whatever they're telling you. You begin to connect, you begin to get on a level with that person. They begin to understand that you are doing more than just watching and or standing in their presence, but you're actually listening and trying to process what they are telling you. See, talk a lot. The word listen, I find this interesting. The word listen has the same exact letters as the word silent. So think about that. The word listen has the same exact letters as the word silent. So saying things like this, I love to hear your story. Tell me more of your story. Tell me how you got to this point in your life. Tell me all the good things and all the bad things that have happened. Or I'd love to hear more. How can I pray for you? How can I encourage you? Sometimes people don't want you to fix anything. You ever been there? You ever just want to get something off your chest and get something off of your thoughts, and you just want to start talking to somebody, and then they start answering you. They start trying to formulate answers, and that's not what you wanted to hear. Sometimes people don't want you to fix anything. They just want to be heard. They just simply want to know that someone understands them and someone cares for them. And we get that again in that example from Luke chapter 24 with Jesus doing that. And what a great example for us to simply be quiet and silent sometimes and really listen to what someone's telling us. See, sometimes lonely people are lonely because they don't have anybody to talk to. Or even if they live with a bunch of other people and they work around a bunch of other people, maybe they go to school with a lot of other people, they don't feel like there's anybody that they're able to have that connection with. So again, my challenge this week for you is that person that you identified as possibly experiencing loneliness, for you to try to engage with that person if at all possible, for you to simply be a shoulder for them to cry on, or just someone they can talk to, someone they can converse with, so we can love by listening. The third thing this morning, after you can love with touch, or you can love by listening, the third thing this morning is you can love with time. Time is a precious, precious commodity. Time is something that once that time has passed, you'll never get that time back. And time is not guaranteed for any one of us. Some of us might live to be 100 years old, and some of us might live to be 25 years old. Some of us might live to be 50 and 60, and it doesn't matter. Time is something that we have no control over. And it's also something that we will never get back. Time is precious. Jesus, first of all, was always going somewhere. Jesus, on his ministry here on earth, he was constantly moving. He was constantly going to heal somebody, or to teach to other people, or whatever it was. He was awesome. You never find a place in the Bible where Jesus was hanging out in his house, just reading a book or watching TV, if you even had those things back then, right? But the point is this: Jesus was always working. When it was his ministry, he took that very seriously. And he was constantly doing something. But here is a unique thing about Jesus' ministry. And even though he was constantly moving, go, everywhere he was at, there's everywhere in the New Testament that shares the story of the earthly ministry of Jesus, it gives us example of Jesus taking time to minister to people, to heal people, taking time to simply just listen to people. As the example we just read about in Matthew chapter 8, where the leper came to him and said, you can heal me, you can cleanse me. And Jesus took that time to touch him and say, you are cleaned. I'm going to share some other examples. Luke chapter 5, verses 17 and 19. He's speaking to a crowd of people. And he was trying to get somewhere, and they kind of stopped him, and he started just teaching them. He took the time to speak to people that were hurting. Even in Luke chapter 8, starting verse 22, this is when Jesus was asleep on a boat, right? So he was finally getting some rest, finally getting some peace and quiet to himself, and then his disciples woke him up and said, oh, the waves are crazy, and there's a storm everywhere. And Jesus woke up, and he silenced the waves. You know that story. But the fact is this, he took the time to listen to the concerns of his disciples. He took that time then to correct that, right? And to perform that miracle. Luke chapter 8, another example in chapter 8, starting verse 43. This is the story that Jesus is walking through the crowd. If you remember the story, and someone comes up and touches him from behind. Now, if you know the backstory to this, it was a woman who had been experiencing an illness for years and years and years. And she had heard about this Jesus, and she had this faith and confidence that if she was just able to touch his garment, that she would be healed. And sure enough, she was. See what happened? She reached up, she touched him, and in this crowd of people, Jesus knew that he was touched. And he stopped and said, "Who touched me?" And then he had a conversation with her, and she was healed. See, Jesus took the time, even though he was rushed, even though he had places to go and things to do and people to see, he took the time to reach out. He took the time to heal people. What an example that we should take in our own lives. What an example of it doesn't matter how busy you get on this earth and how busy you get in your life, that time is the most precious gift that you can give somebody else. Here's an example of that with my kids, with Corbin and Austin, my two boys. Something that Heather and I started doing a number of years ago was we started having what we call Daddy and Austin dates, or Daddy and Corbin dates, and they have Mommy and Daddy, or Mommy and Corbin dates, or Mommy and Austin dates. And now with Malin, we're having those as well. Those are just one-on-one times that I take one of the boys out, and maybe we get some ice cream, maybe we just walk around a store back when we can actually go places, right? Sometimes I just take him here to the church, and we just hang out while I just work around the church and they play. But the point is, it's important for me to show my love to my kids by spending one-on-one time with them. Maybe you've done that with your kids. Maybe you're a kid that had a parent that did that for you. And it makes such a big difference. I had one of those fairly recently with Corbin, and we just drove somewhere together. Grabbed something and grabbed a Dairy Queen, I think it was, on the way back. Actually, we came here. We did a couple errands here at the church, and then on the way back we got some Dairy Queen. And I can tell you that those are memories that I will have with me for the rest of my life. Because as I'm driving back to the house, as we get back to the house, I remember he grabbed my arm and he says, "Thanks, Dad. I really, really like that." I enjoy spending time with my kids because I love my kids. And for me, sharing that time with them is equally as beneficial to them, because they get to have a one-to-one relationship, but they get to know and appreciate and know how much I love them. We can share love with other people simply by spending our most precious resource, which is our time. We're all busy. We all have things in our life that we need to get done, and I am guilty as anybody with sometimes, especially with my kids, saying, "Hey Dad, can we go play this or do this?" And I say, "Buddy, just a moment, I don't have time right now." And it's devastating for me when I say that and I see their little heads go down and says, "Okay, I just hope you're not so busy later." And then I usually immediately stop whatever I'm doing, because I come to my senses and realize that whatever I'm doing is not nearly as important as spending some good quality time with them. And again, Jesus was the same example. See, here's another way of looking at it. When you lose somebody close to you, when someone passes away that you're close to, most people would agree that the most precious thing that they want is to be able to spend more time with that person. We don't think about we don't think about the glorious vacations or think about other physical things we wish we could do. If any of us, and I'm sure there's none would be without exception here, if we could have a choice, most of us would choose to have some precious time back with one that is close and dear to us, because we understand the concept of time. And if you understand the concept of how precious your time is, also understand this: when someone is experiencing loneliness, sometimes the only thing they need is the time spent with you or somebody that will show them love and show them affection and show them compassion and empathy for whatever they're going through. I'm going to wrap up this morning by asking this question to you. What if you feel alone? This morning I said, well, we all experience loneliness at some point of our lives, and obviously I still believe that to be true. But for you this morning, maybe you're the one that's experiencing loneliness, even right now. You've been going through something in your life and you feel alone. You feel like you don't have anybody you can talk to or anybody that would listen to you. Even though you might be surrounded by people, you still feel like you're alone. So what if you feel alone? It's no accident that you are here and no accident that you are listening this morning. First of all, I want you to know that we care about you, and we meaning the church. Obviously, myself as the pastor, but as a church, one of the great things about a local body of believers, a local church, is that we can show care and compassion for each other. And I think we'd also all agree that's one of the things that we've really missed about being here together in this building, is that we're able to share stories with each other. We're able just to laugh and to cry and to go through life experiences with each other. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to coming back even this next week, being able to see and have conversations with people again in person. But if you're someone this right now in this moment that is experiencing loneliness, I want you to know this: you are cared and you are loved. And there's a God that loves you, a God that cares for you, a God that loves you so much that He sent His only Son to this earth to die on a cross for you. I want to pray for you. I want to encourage you. I want to read from you real quick Isaiah chapter 41 verse 10. It simply says this: "Don't you be afraid." This is God speaking. "For I am with you. Don't be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. Yes, I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness." You have a God that cares for you, a God that loves you. And like I said just now, a God that loves you so much that He sent His Son to die upon a cross so that He may then be raised 3 days later, and that we may spend eternity with Him in heaven. And if there's never been a time and place in your life that you have experienced and that you have asked God to come into your heart, Christ to come into your heart and forgive you of your sins, in just a moment I'm going to pray. I'm going to encourage you to do that. And actually, if we can just all bow our heads right now real quick and just for a moment. Again, for anybody here this morning that's never had a time and place where they've asked for salvation of their sins, this is the time and this is the place to do it. Perhaps you're someone that's experienced loneliness in your life, and that loneliness is probably brought on by the fact that you are separated from your holy God. You're separated from God. And if you would simply ask Christ into your heart and begin that relationship with God, I am telling you, that's going to change everything. That loneliness that you are feeling will most likely disappear, because you will have the indwelling Holy Spirit in your heart, in your life. So if that's you this morning, in just a moment I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask you to repeat some words with me. But to the Christian this morning, to believer this morning, yes, even though you're a believer, I know, trust me, I know you can still experience loneliness. And maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you're experiencing loneliness. Maybe you're in a crowded room, but you feel all alone. Maybe you're in a house with a lot of other people, but you feel that no one can hear you, no one can see you. I'm here to tell you that we see you, I see you. And most importantly, more importantly, Christ sees you. And whatever loneliness that you are experiencing, know that there is a God that loves you, a God that can physically touch you, a God that listens to you, and a God that has spent His time here on earth through Christ Jesus to live on this earth and to die for you so you may spend eternity with Him. That's how much He loves you. That's how precious His time was to Him, that He spent it on you. So let's pray this morning. God, thank you for allowing us to be here, and I pray for anyone this morning that has never accepted you into their heart. God, right now they're crying out to you and say, God, I am a sinner in need of salvation. Forgive me of my sins so that I may spend eternity with you, God, that you may transform my life here on this earth, that I would have the Holy Spirit dwelling within me so that I might live a life with purpose and a life with meaning. And God, if I'm experiencing loneliness, God, that you will heal me, God, and help me not to experience that loneliness any longer. And God, for any believer this morning that is experiencing loneliness, God, I pray that you will speak to them, remind them of how mighty, how great, how powerful you are. and that you can heal them of that loneliness, God. You can fill that void that they might be feeling in their hearts right now. And God, I pray that we as believers can be those hands and feet for you, that we will reach out to somebody this week, that we will share the love of Christ, and that we will be just someone that will listen to their heartache, someone that will listen to their stories. God, someone that may be giving them a physical touch, Lord, just allow them and remind them that they are loved, God. Allow us to listen, God. And please help us to be encouragement to all those around us. In your precious and your holy name, we say amen. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. We want to encourage you to connect with us. And maybe you made a decision this morning to follow Christ. And if you did, I'm so excited and I want to hear about it. Perhaps you've made a decision to rededicate your life to Christ, or made a decision to serve Christ in a local church. And for all those, if you go to cbctoday.com/connect, that's our online connection card. It's an opportunity for you to share what your decision was this week, whether it's to accept Christ or maybe just rededicate your life to Christ, or perhaps it's simply a prayer request that you have that you want to let me know about. That is the best way to do that, cbctoday.com/connect. Like I said, beginning of the message this morning, we will be back here physically, back at church on June 21st, this next Sunday on Father's Day. But we will also continue to have these services streamed and premiered on Facebook and on YouTube, so that if you're more comfortable staying in your own home for the time being, that is fine. And we encourage you then to do so. But in either way, I will either see you on camera or in person next Sunday. But until then, love, grow, and serve.